Flood myths exist from all over the ancient world, but there's no concrete evidence to suggest any of them ever represented a historical event. Many historical catastrophes have been proposed as the root of the myths. These include a tsunami that might have followed the volcanic eruption of Thera in 1600 BCE, the sea level rises at the end of the last ice age, exceptional flooding of the twin rivers of Mesopotamia from where the earliest deluge myths are known, and flooding of water from the Mediterranean Sea into the Black Sea. The biblical story of a global flood killing almost every living being is a myth. We have overwhelming archaeological and geological evidence to show it never happened. Such a devastating global flood is also a physical impossibility. There isn't enough water on the planet to cover all the land. 96.5% of the Earth's water is already in the oceans, so sea levels could never rise that high. Greek and Roman sources inform us by their time the story of the Great Flood was inherently linked to the tale of a great conflagration. Both myths represent the belief that the world was cleansed at fixed intervals by alternating deluges and fires. Greek and Roman authors linked their flood and conflagration stories to the movement of the heavens over long periods of time due to precession. We call this movement the Great Year. Over the course of 25,776 years, the sun appears to move backwards through the houses of the zodiac, in the opposite direction that it moves during a solar year. The Greeks may have seen this great year as having a summer and a winter, just like the solar year. The flood represented the winter and the conflagration represented the summer. Interestingly, in the Zoroastrian version of the myth, it's not a flood but a very harsh winter that destroys all life on Earth. The hero of that story is Yima. He builds an enclosure on a mountain to survive the winter and takes 2 of every species of plant and animal. A Babylonian poem called the Era Epic also suggests that the Babylonian flood myth may have been about a change of the positionings of the stars. It has the chief god Marduk state, "Once, long ago, I grew angry. Indeed, I left my dwelling and caused a deluge. When I left my dwelling, the regulation of heaven and earth disintegrated. The shaking of heaven meant the position of the heavenly bodies changed, and I didn't restore them. I built another house and settled therein." Ovid appears to mention this cycle in his recounting of the flood of Deucalion. Deucalion was the Greek equivalent of Noah. Now Zeus was on the point of hurling his thunderbolts against the earth, but he feared so many fiery bolts might ignite and burn the universe to the furthest pole. He remembered that a time was fated to come when the sea and earth and the dome of heaven would ignite, and fire destroy the mighty structure of the universe. So he laid aside the weapons forged by the skill of the Cyclops, and he decided upon a different punishment, to send rain down from the whole sky and destroy mankind beneath the waves. Plato also noticed this cycle of flood and conflagration in his story of Atlantis. There have been and will be many different catastrophes to destroy mankind, the greatest of them by fire and water. Your story of how Phaethon, child of the sun, harnessed his father's chariot, but was unable to drive it along his father's course, and so burnt up everything on the earth and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now this has the form of a myth, but really represents the truth that at long intervals a variation in the course of the heavenly bodies and a consequent widespread destruction by fire of things on earth. On the other hand, the gods purged the earth with a deluge of water. The story of Phaethon is a Greek version of the conflagration myth. Phaethon was the son of Helios, and one day he decided to drive his father's sun chariot. Unfortunately, Phaethon lost control of the solar chariot. It rode too low in the sky and set fire to the earth. It's hard to know if this cycle of flood and conflagration was part of the earliest flood mythology, but it appears to be present in the Bible. There are 2 main references to the great conflagration in the Bible. One is the myth of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other is the prediction of a future final day of Yahweh's wrath. Origen wrote about Celsus making the comparison between Phaethon and Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sins, related by Moses in Genesis, is compared by Celsus to the story of Phaethon. The Gospel of Luke has Jesus reference the predicted final conflagration when he states, "I have come to set fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled." Elsewhere in Luke, Jesus describes the event expressly using imagery from the Old Testament references to the cycle of flood and conflagration. As it was in Noah's day, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man. People ate and drank and married until the day that Noah went into the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise as it was in Lot's day, they ate and drank, they bought and sold, they planted and built. But on the day that Lot left Sodom, fire and sulphur rained down from the heaven and destroyed them all. It will be like that on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Elsewhere in the New Testament, the second letter of Peter also mentions this cycle. There were heavens and earth long ago, created by God's word out of water and with water. And by water the world of that time was destroyed, the water of the flood. By the same word the present heavens and earth are being preserved for fire, kept until the day of judgment when the godless will be destroyed. In the 2nd century, Celsus noted that the Christians of his day didn't understand the mythology that underpinned their apocalyptic beliefs. The belief has spread among them, from a misunderstanding of the accounts of these occurrences, that after lengthened cycles of time and the returns and conjunctions of planets, conflagrations and floods are accustomed to happen, because after the last flood, which took place in the time of Deucalion, the lapse of time, agreeably to the alternation of all things, requires a conflagration, and this made them give utterance to the erroneous opinion that God will descend, bringing fire like a torturer. The philosopher Lucretius mentioned this cycle of flood and conflagration in his treatise called The Nature of the Universe. In the section on cosmology, he discusses how legend tells of one occasion when fire got the upper hand and once when water lorded it over the land. Lucretius wrote of the conflagration, "The victory of fire, when earth felt its withering blast, occurred when the galloping steeds that draw the chariot of the sun swept Phaethon from the true course, right out of the zone of ether and far over the lands." He contrasts this with the deluge. Another legend tells us how water likewise once massed its forces and began to prevail, until many cities and men were drowned beneath its floods. The cycle is also mentioned in the Corpus Hermeticum, the writings attributed to the legendary pagan sage Hermes Trismegistus. God the Creator, when he looked upon the things that happened, established his design, which is good, against the disorder. Sometimes he submerged it in a great flood, at other times he burnt it in a searing fire. Cicero likewise noted, "Even so the deluges and conflagrations that will inevitably descend upon the earth at fixed intervals will make it impossible for any glory we may gain in this way to be eternal, or even to last for any length of time." Justin Martyr was one of the earliest Christian writers, and he also noted this cycle, as well as equating Noah to Deucalion. But the fire of judgment would descend and utterly dissolve all things, even as formerly the flood left no one but him only with his family, who is called by us Noah, and by you Deucalion, from whom again such vast numbers have sprung, some of them evil and others good, for so we may say that there will be a conflagration. Another Christian writer, Origen, wrote of a providence which either preserves earthly things or purges them by means of floods and conflagrations, when the wickedness that is in it has become too great. Augustine similarly noted the cycle when he wrote of the final judgment. "Then shall the figure of this world pass away in a conflagration of universal fire, as once before the world was flooded with a deluge of universal water." The 3rd century writer Censorinus overtly linked this cataclysmic cycle to the great year. There is a great year, whose winter is a great flood and whose summer is a world conflagration. In these alternating periods the world is now going up in flames, now turning to water. The writings of Nonnus of Panopolis also suggest this cycle of flood and conflagration might relate to the movement of the stars due to precession. Nonnus described the flood of Deucalion with, "The rainy Zeus covered the whole sky with clouds and flooded all the earth. Zeus's heavy trumpet bellowed with its thunderclaps, while all the stars moved in their appointed houses." He described the conflagration of Phaethon with, "There was tumult in the sky, shaking the joints of the immovable universe. The very axle bent that runs through the middle of the revolving heavens and holds the constellations in their places. Libyan Atlas could hardly support the self-rolling firmament of the stars as he rested on his knees with bowed back under this great burden, and all the constellations and stars were thrown from their paths in complete disarray." The belief that the world would be cleansed in a final conflagration may also have been represented in some Greek literature. A great fire was a set piece that ended several Greek plays and myths. At the end of the Odyssey, after killing the suitors of his wife Penelope, Odysseus sets fire to the great hall of his palace. The same ending occurs in the Bacchae, where Dionysus frees his imprisoned followers and sets fire to King Pentheus' palace.